This is the Business Stuff Podcast. This is where I will share the lessons I've learned from advising thousands of businesses over almost 30 years. Each episode will give you practical insight to allow you to learn from other people's mistakes. I'll be pulling in experts from our team and the world of business, and together we'll make sure your business is giving you what you want. My name is Martin, and this is the Business Stuff Podcast.
Hello everyone, and welcome to this episode of the Business Stuff Podcast. I am Jack from our Accelerator team here, and I am joined with a very special guest this week, Nicki Clark from UMi. Hi Nicki, how are we doing?
Morning Jack, I'm very well. How are you?
Yeah, not too bad. We were just talking off air about how busy you are today, so we're very honoured to have some of your time this morning.
Oh, not at all. I'm really looking forward to it. The sun's shining and I'll be dashing about the north of England shortly, but looking forward to having a chat.
Of course, with like all the snow that's been going on recently, I mean, it's a miracle that you'd be able to get out of your driveway. So we got you on because of your fantastic skill set and expertise around ESG. So
that's where we're on a hiding to nothing already, because I am by no means an expert in ESG. That would be doing a great disservice to those people out there that are. But I'll do my best to have a chat about it.
I'm sure you'll do it more than a valiant effort. I mean, yes, if I had to speak about my knowledge on ESG, then yes, it would be a very short podcast. So I suppose it'd be really interesting to kick this off to get a bit more of an understanding of yourself and UMi, the organisation that you kind of run, and just get a little bit of an understanding of what you guys do.
Yeah, sure. So at UMi, what we do is we help businesses go further. And we do that by taking the hard work out of helping them find and use the best information, advice and finance, so that they can overcome boundaries, hurdles, or seize the opportunities that would otherwise pass them by. We've been around since 2007. We've helped over 500,000 small and medium-sized businesses so far, which we're really proud about. And I guess we've always had a really strong social purpose in the business right from the day that we started out. And that's kind of evident through our culture, and it sits at the heart of every team member. But now we're really proud to say that we are employee owned, and also we recently secured our B Corp certification in September. So we've got some sort of external validations of that purpose and that ethic. So we do that right across the UK. We haven't trodden into international markets just yet, but those...
Never say never.
Well, indeed. That's certainly on the horizon for the next 5-year strategy that we're currently developing at the moment.
Well, that's really interesting. And obviously how our two organisations got together was through the B Corp stuff. And congratulations on your B Corp certification. I know it's a very difficult process to go through, but very rewarding. So it's good to see that you got through it unscathed. It'd be very interesting.
You guys were trailblazers in the Northeast, weren't you? Because I think you guys were the first, weren't you?
We were indeed, yes. We were kind of the first one in the Northeast, and I think we're one of a handful of accountants that are B Corps in the Northeast. But I suppose you're actually more of an expert on it than I have, because you actually recently taken on joined the board of trustees for the B Lab in the UK as well. So that sounds like something very interesting, something we might touch on a little bit more. Yeah, sure. Relying on your inside knowledge on what's going on in terms of the B Lab and around ESG. But I suppose it'd be worth just talking a little bit more about your B Corp journey and how you came across it and how you found that process. Given that it's B Corp month this month in March, it'd just be really interesting to kind of get your feeling on the whole process and the benefits of B Corp as a whole.
Yeah, sure, thanks. Well, I guess first thing to say, particularly because it's B Corp month, B Corp is actually primarily and first and foremost a movement. So, the certification stuff, and I guess you can say this once you've come out the other end, but I do firmly believe this now that I've got to understand what B Corp is all around a little bit more, it is about a movement. It's about creating and galvanizing people and businesses to lead and manage businesses in a way that places equal priority on people, planet and profit first and foremost. And you don't need a certification to do that. And in doing so, B Corp exists, and the various B Labs around the world exist to be a force for good in developing that global economy that is, I guess, more inclusive, equitable, and it's a more regenerative system than it currently is. So I think it's really important for people to take that away, and hopefully, I know we've got a joint event at the end of the month that people will come along to in Newcastle, that actually you can get involved in B Corp and what it stands for without going through the certification process. For us, how we came across it and why we decided to pursue certification was because ever since we started, we've had 3 key success measures to the business. Whether or not we are a workplace where talent thrives, our long-term balance sheet health rather than our short-term profitability, and thirdly, the difference that we make in the world around us as a consequence of the services that we deliver as a business, but also how we act and behave as a business. Now, they've been our 3 kind of key headline strategic success measures for many, many years, way before we came across B Corp. And we used to use all sorts of different methodologies, as all good businesses do, to evidence how we were achieving those success measures. So things like we've been ranked a number of times in the best 100 companies to work for in the UK and in our sector. We use things like the level of career development that people can enjoy within the business, in terms of how many roles they might move around into, etc. We've also used things like ISO. We've got various ISO environmental standards and all sorts of different measures around environmental impact. We monitor how much our own community investment fund invests. So there's a community foundation in Durham that leads on that for us. So we've done all sorts of things.
It might be the same one that we have.
That's brilliant. I didn't realise that, yes. But that's fantastic.
Yeah.
So we use all sorts of, previous to B Corp, we used to use all sorts of methods to identify and really evidence whether or not we were achieving those things. And then just by sheer chance, I think it was really coincidental. Our CFO, a lady called Kim Oliver, and I independently stumbled across B Corp. I think there was perhaps a webinar that somebody had mentioned, or we'd been along to an event, etc. And we thought, this is really interesting, because actually when you look at it, it's about the very 3 key success measures that we hold dear as a business. So we investigated it and suddenly discovered that actually the certification process, and this is where I think the certification process adds value, gave us such a fantastic framework around which not only could we evidence externally whether or not we were doing what we said we wanted to do, but we could also have quite a structured way in improving how we operated as a business that would deliver even greater impact across those 3 success measures. So that's why we did the certificate. And as I say, not everybody has to, and it's not right for everybody, but that doesn't mean you can't get on board with that movement. So we started our journey just before the pandemic hit. So we hit a bit of a quagmire in the middle as the pandemic created for many businesses, and indeed B Corp itself, because of course they had people who were in and out of the business poorly and had commitments elsewhere as well. So it took us about I think 6 months to do our self-assessment and decide whether or not we were going to go for it. And that self-assessment process, I think, is brilliant. And if anybody does anything, do that, because it really gives you a very objective view of your business. And as I say, at the very, very least, it will give you a framework against which you can think, actually, we could probably spend a little bit more time and investment in that particular area around people, or we're not doing enough on planet. So whether you go forward after your self-assessment or not, I think that process is really, really valuable. And as a consequence of the self-assessment, we came out of it looking in really, really quite good shape. So they do give you a score at the moment. I think that may change in the future. We might come on to that. But we scored about 135, something like that. And the threshold to move forward to certification is 80 currently, across a number of areas in the business around governance, customers, people, environment. So that gave us the confidence to push on, and indeed we started the certification process, which you will know is quite intensive. And this is what I like about B Corp. It is definitely not a tick box exercise. It is quite intensive, and where I think it differs from perhaps other standards that we've used in the business in previous times is you submit your evidence, but the evidence itself is questioned. So they don't just go, oh, right, yeah, you've got a certificate that says that, or you've told us you do X on this. They actually interview and really, really thoroughly test that evidence, which I think is fantastic. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So in that regard, it is an intensive process. It is quite a long process. I think on average, it takes a business going from their self-assessment through to full certification around about 12 months, sometimes a little longer. So it's not something to be entered into lightly, but it's a very supportive process as well, because actually I've experienced both on a customer side, but also I can see that now from a board perspective, what B Lab is about is affecting change, empowering people to do more. So it's not in their interests to not help you and support you and coach you, but that doesn't mean everybody gets the certificate. So it's a really good learning and development process as well.
Yeah, I mean, as you said, I think there's so many good points there to take out of that. That first of all, it is not just a tick box exercise. It's a very deliberately intensive process in order to sort of maintain its integrity as a movement. I suppose we don't want to be giving it out to everyone. It needs to be difficult to demonstrate that you're showing the values and behaviours of the organisation, I suppose. Secondly, you're absolutely right, is that it's not necessarily the case that people need to go down the full B Corp route. I think there are baby steps to take, and generally it's an evolution of ideas as you progress, and that assessment that you talked about there certainly provides you with some really good insights and some self-awareness on places that maybe you need to improve on, such as your people and your planet, and maybe looking at kind of your environmental policies, etc. So it is a really interesting process, a really good education tool, and highly worthwhile. Just kind of dipping your toe in. But yeah, I mean, wow, we've got a fantastic kind of overview of what the kind of that B Corp journey looked like. So thank you very much for sharing that. I suppose we should probably get into the meat of it now then, in terms of what we wanted to talk about, which is ESG. And I suppose what I wanted to know is kind of for the layman out there, for the people, because there's a lot of businesses out there that are aware of ESG and that it's a thing and it's going to be important, but they just don't know what it is and why it's potentially going to be so important to some businesses. So it'd be interesting to get your thoughts on that.
Yeah, sure. And I am a layman, really. I'm not an expert.
Good. Let's speak in layman's terms then.
Yeah, I'll probably talk about some people that we've actually brought into our business externally to help us think through some of this stuff, because it can be quite tricky. And I think that's perhaps one of the first things to say, that there are some phenomenal experts out there who can help you with this, because it does feel sometimes a little bit like Pandora's box when you lift the lid. It's like, oh my goodness, where do I start? Mm-hmm. But to boil it all down really, really simply, it is very much aligned to what B Corp are trying to achieve, and that's what's phenomenal. There's all these things that are happening now, I think, in the world and in the environment, and indeed, if we boil it down to the Northeast, that are about actually driving change in areas around the environment, around society and people, and around being good governors of businesses. And B Corp's one of those, but there's lots and lots of things, whether it's businesses in the community, whether it's people like the community foundations. We've got now, what's it called? The Northeast Business Ethics Group. So there's tons and tons of opportunities to get involved in this, and lots of people who are creating a phenomenal movement. So ESG is just about that. It's thinking about what impact you currently have on the environment, society, and how you govern your business, and how you might approach that differently to make an even more positive impact than you do already. And what we did, I think, first of all, you have to think about why you would consider it. I'm a big believer from a business perspective is you have to understand what you're going to get back from it. Why do it? This whole notion that you shouldn't think about commercial terms is just daft, in my opinion. At the end of the day, you're a business, but it's about creating the balance across profitability and people and so on. So for us, I think where we've seen benefits is undoubtedly, aside from just playing our part in making the world a better place, is with customers. So you will see increasingly, so over the coming months and years, more and more customers carrying out due diligence on you as a supplier using ESG methodologies and models.
We're seeing more of that now, aren't we? Yeah,
indeed, definitely. Yeah. So, but it's just going to get more so, and it'll get more detailed, I think, in terms of scrutiny. So people are really, really interested in, or becoming increasingly interested in, their supply chain. So it's not just what do we evidence as businesses in our own right, but how do our supply chains support that, is really becoming increasingly important. So if you're not thinking about this already and you do operate in quite significant supply chains currently, or for example, you're working or you want to work with the public sector or large corporates, you absolutely need to be on this agenda. Even just from pure commercial terms, in terms of you're not going to be able to compete if you're not. Secondly, I think talent, acquisition and retention, actually. I don't think this statistic is perhaps true today because of the way that the labour market has changed, but back in 2018, I think it was LinkedIn did a survey, and 70% of people apparently said they would take a pay cut to work somewhere that had shared values. Now, I think that number will have changed a bit because of the economic crisis, the fact that a number of households are struggling at the moment, and indeed the labour market dynamics. But nevertheless, a staggering 70% of people saying that they would consider a pay cut to work for a business who had aligned values. So it gives you an indication, I think, of how powerful it can be in terms of attracting people with the right sentiment, culture, values to your business, and also potentially a really neat way, and frankly potentially low cost way, of retaining talent in your business.
Yeah, I mean, I do a lot of work. Sorry to jump in there.
No,
I do a lot of work around motivation, and generally the strongest motivation across virtually everyone that we survey is this whole idea of being basically feeling like you're making a difference. We call it the searcher, is kind of how we describe it. But yeah, it's kind of the feeling of making a difference, and that is made a lot easier, and you can be a lot more engaged if the business that you're working for is actually doing the same thing and matching kind of that idea of making a difference to their customers, to the wider community up and down their supply chain, to the environment. It's just so important.
Yeah,
so
completely agree.
Yeah, as a staff retention tool, so strong.
And then the third element that I think it delivers significant benefit against is investment. So if you're looking to secure external investment into your business, that doesn't have to be equity. It could just be debt or something of that nature. The various high street banks, for example, are presenting better fees structures to businesses who can evidence their ESG credentials. But certainly equity investors are really interested in this now, in terms of what your credentials are and how you're going to improve those on the back of the investment as well, not just your normal standard, how are you going to grow your business and give us as a return on our equity. So if you are looking to raise external finance, again, I think this is a reason why you should be looking at how do you begin to start to really evidence your ESG credentials. And therein lies Pandora's box, because I was, I just flung my hands up in the air, first of all, when this came across my bows, and I thought, oh my goodness, how on earth are we going to evidence this stuff? Well, we brought in, I'm going to name drop now, but we brought in a business called Sustainable Business Services. They're based in the Northeast, and we worked with a gentleman called James Staniforth, who set that business up, and he helped guide us through how we do it. And he has a whizzy tool. It's a bit like a black art, I think, but he has this miraculous way of taking loads and loads of data that we all have. So, for example, what's your energy bills? Where do your people work? And therefore, he goes off and works out potentially what the carbon footprint in terms of travel to work is. Usually, on average, how much printing do you do a week, etc. He takes all of that data and then says, right, this is your starting point. This is your carbon footprint, and so on and so forth on the environmental side of things, which is immensely helpful, because there's no way we could have done that ourselves. It is a real specialism. So definitely find yourself, I think, somebody who can come in and help you do that. And it's not crazy money either. We're not talking ridiculous sums of money from a consultancy perspective. So we did that, and obviously through the B Corp certification as well, you have to, one of the things that you have to do once you're certified is publish a report annually with your accounts that you submit to Companies House to say how you're meeting you're fulfilling the requirements of B Corp certification on an annual basis, because you don't get recertified every year. That happens on, I think it's a triannual cycle.
Yes. It is.
So we have to pull together all of those evidence streams and so on and so forth, which the environmental features are just one. But that's how we came at it from a governance perspective. This is really about how you lead and govern your business in terms of ethics, but it can also be things like how you behave with your supply chain. How do you behave with your suppliers? Back in the day, 20, 30 odd years ago, it was almost, how do you drive better value out of your supply chain by being a little wee bit ruthless? Whereas actually today, what I think we all value and respect far more is much more of a partnership approach through how we govern supply chains and quality and so on and so forth. So, and
we're even talking about really basic stuff here, like actually paying within your credit terms and stuff like that. I mean, which you may go, well, obviously, but there's so many people out there that just don't do that.
Yeah, surprisingly, there still is. But actually, this is where it's a really interesting time, I think, Jack, on both an individual employee level and also a supply chain level, because as ever, when times get tough financially for us as individuals or for corporate entities, there is a tendency for ethics and values to get challenged. And sometimes it's really, really hard to avoid that, because actually, I don't know whether you're seeing this at the moment, but I'm seeing in our own business and many other businesses, people having to change employment because they need to generate as quickly as possible more income into the household to offset against rising energy bills, etc., etc. And therefore they may be choosing to go to a business that doesn't have those shared values in the short term, and they are having to compromise a wee bit. But for businesses, in terms of payment terms, some businesses are finding it really tough at the minute, from a cash flow perspective. And therefore, whilst, they may hold very, very dear that value around respecting suppliers and paying on time, they might be really struggling to do that. So I think it's not always because they don't have good ethics. Sometimes there are external pressures that cause people to not be able to exercise the approaches that they would want to. But what I see is where businesses can't do that, the whole governance piece, which is reflected through great communication and collaboration and so on and so forth, comes to the fore. So rather than just not paying people, there's an explanation, there's an understanding, there's an agreed methodology to resolve that situation, rather than just leaving people hanging, which I think is the worst example of it.
Yeah, and that's, as you said, that's where the partnership really comes in, where you have that communication and open dialogue and honesty. And again, you'll get a lot more change out of your supply chain by having that, I suppose. So basically, to summarize in terms of why people should be doing it, is that you may need it for your continued growth and continue to attract customers, to continue to attract staff, and to attract investment as well, I suppose, are kind of the three main things to take away from that.
Absolutely.
We kind of touched on reporting there, and at the moment, probably one of the frustrations it is for people like ourselves is that this is all very much an opt-in kind of approach at the moment, in terms of only the early adopters are taking this to people that really value the ideas of ESG. So, but using your position on B Lab and kind of your expertise within the field, like, what do you think is going to be happening in terms of like a compliance or like a legislative agenda towards ESG? Obviously, we know that a lot more large businesses, blue chip companies, etc., have got all of these reporting requirements already, and as you said, we'll have to attach all their sustainability reports, ESG reports, corporate social responsibility reports. All of that stuff will be part of their annual reporting alongside their accounts. But for SMEs, none of that's really out there. But do you think that potentially is going to change coming down the line?
Well, I think, personally, I always believe that you need to try and help people do things because they want to do it rather than they have to do it. You get much better outcomes if they want to do something. So compliance,
change hearts and minds,
compliance and legislation plays a part. But more fundamentally, I think it is that hearts and mind thing that we have to win. And I think that's where B Corp globally, but certainly B Corp in the UK, have got a really good balance. Because the movement is about creating a will, a desire, a belief. And therefore that will take time. Anything like that takes time to create the critical mass and the momentum that is needed to really enact change. But alongside that, the B Corp is involved with a number of other businesses in something called the Better Business Act. And this is something else that people could consider getting involved in rather than going down B Corp certification. So the Better Business Act, naturally, because of B Corp UK's involvement, supports the principles of B Corp around people, planet and profit. And what it seeks to do is there is a specific part of the Companies Act that now I think it's section 172, if anybody's remotely interested in going and having a squirrel and a read of it. But basically what it does is it's the guidance to directors of businesses on how they fulfill their obligations as directors of the business to it and its shareholders. And it places a primacy, if you like, on profit. So that's what that piece of that piece of law does, really, company law does. And what the Better Business Act is seeking to achieve is a change to that reflects the balance, that actually, as a director, to do right by a business, you need to consider all three elements: people, planet and profit. in equal measure. And to therefore stop even those most balanced business leaders having to revert to profit, because that's what the Companies Act tells them to do. So I think legislation plays a part, but as I say, I think it has to be a part of something which is about creating desire and will for change, rather than just the sledgehammer to crack a nut, which sometimes legislative change can be. And of course, that then leads you into the whole debate around greenwashing. And it's a really, really interesting time at the moment, because sometimes compliance and legislation can put people into that sort of tick box mentality, rather than really affecting, rather than really affecting change. But then there's a really interesting debate to be had, because actually if somebody's doing it, but they're doing it because they have to rather than they want to, they're still doing it. So why is that not okay? But of course, like you say there, if somebody's just ticking boxes and fudging the numbers, then that's not achieving any benefit for them, frankly, nor the environment and world and people around them. So it's a really, really interesting time, I think, Jack, about where compliance and legislation has a role alongside just frankly doing the right thing, and more of us being able to, willing to, and wanting to do the right thing.
You're right, yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think the Better Business Act has its place because it will protect directors from shareholders that will be displeased that their needs are not being put first, and it's all about maximising shareholder wealth. But in reality, as you said, it's about realigning it. So it's the triple line, isn't it? The profit, Indeed. Planet, and people. And yeah, just having some. I think there's stuff about kind of unifying some reporting, just so that there's a bit of consensus about what people should be reporting on. But it is really interesting. But you're right. It's you can't necessarily just go, right, we're going to change the law and everyone has to do it. There needs to be more of a holistic hearts and minds attack on why it's important, and incentivize, use the carrot and the stick. Because if we go back to in terms of like, you can potentially lose customers because you're not showing the necessary mindset or ideals towards becoming more sustainable as a business. Like, that's obviously disincentivizing people. But then obviously we need to find ways of actually encouraging people to do this as well. And it's not a straightforward task, though, is it? Unfortunately.
No, it's not.
We'll keep plugging away. We will keep going.
Well, I think it's really exciting because I think the movement is certainly gathering pace.
Yeah, it's growing as you said, at a rapid pace. So that's very encouraging to see, and hopefully that will continue. I'm sure it will continue. I suppose then what we want to kind of get onto is maybe some of the practicalities for some of those business owners out there or directors going, like, I know this is important. I feel very overwhelmed. I've just opened Pandora's box. I don't know anything about sustainability or what the hell is a circular economy, diversity and inclusion. I mean, what kind of initial steps can people start to look at to kind of get their ESG journey started?
Well, naturally, there's tons of resources out there, but I will make a plug for doing the B Corp self-assessment, because I think it's one of the, and I'm speaking from personal experience, I think it's one of the few tools that brings it all together in a way that you can plug in information, assess yourself without anybody else being concerned about it at that point in time, assess your own credentials against those three things. Whether you call it ESG, people, planet, profit, it's all broadly the same thing. So I would definitely advocate, if you're wanting to understand where you currently sit, doing that B Corp self-assessment. The other practical things are, so if you're interested in seeing what some other businesses are doing who are not grandiose and huge and big corporates and have, limited resources. Another little shout out is to a business called Just Williams, who you may know, Jessica, who leads that business. They've just published their first impact statement. So now they are going through their B Corp certification, but that's not why they've done it, which I think is fantastic. And I think it's a brilliant, brilliant example of an impact statement. It's colourful, it's real life, it's got loads and loads of great things in there that they've been doing, and they've been immensely creative about how they've made a more material impact with really quite, limited resources as a smaller business. So I definitely have a look at their impact statement to give you a little bit of a steer. Also, there is something called the UK Climate Hub, which has some great content on there in terms of giving you some introductory stuff to get into this. The British Business Bank's page, I think, is pretty straightforward as well. They've got a section on ESG, going back to my point about investors. So the fact that the British Business Bank has a section on ESG gives you an indication of how seriously investors are starting to think about this stuff and take this stuff, because they're encouraging businesses who might be looking to them for investment to think about it. The other things, if you want to just get stuck into making some changes in your business, even just things like changing your lighting to LED lights. And there are lots of the local authorities have grants to help you do that. There's environmental grants that can help you do that. So this doesn't need to be extra cost to your business, and actually your energy usage will go down quite significantly as a consequence. So it's actually going to be a cost saving to you. So why wouldn't you do it? That's just a no-brainer. And then there's loads of other stuff around how straightforward ideas about waste management, and my biggest message on some of these things is get your team involved, because actually, if you're just the singular person trying to do this stuff in your business, you're never going to succeed. So have somebody who gets really exercised. We have somebody in our business who literally, I can't stop going around the bins, because they go around the bins to check that the right things are in the right recycle bins. And I'm like, it's fine. Everybody's putting them in the right place. No, I need, and they are
doing a full-on audit.
So obsessed with it because they feel so passionately about it. So find your bin warrior in terms of in your business, and make sure that you get loads of other people involved in it. And then, as I say, if you're really going to get into the technical stuff and you need that first carbon footprint statement, which is really tricky, that is tricky stuff. Find a consultant or advisor to come in and help you do that, because it is quite tough.
I think we found the title of the podcast: Find Your Bin Warrior.
The thing is, she'll know exactly who it is when she sees that.
Well, we'll dedicate this episode to all the bin warriors out there. It is really interesting, though. It's just it's not about a plan of, right, we need to have a full ESG policy mapped out. We need to have it all written down before we start doing anything. It's about kind of doing the easy wins, the low-hanging fruit, understanding where you are at the moment. I think it's probably the best way of summarising it, in terms of, getting that carbon footprint report, get your team involved, get a temperature feel on what their thoughts are on it. I think Graham was particularly good. Graham Purvis, our MD, was very good at kind of winning the hearts and minds of the director group when they first embarked on it, and then the wider firm as well. And we're seeing some really good engagement in that, in terms of the B Corp message, and trying to get that out to our clients. So it's you're absolutely right. There's a lot of small things, and particularly on the grant stuff, it is a no-brainer. Why wouldn't you do that?
On that note, actually, so on the UMi SatNav service, there's some content on there, some really helpful content, because we believe in trying to break the elephant down, because this whole subject is huge and it feels a bit scary, and therefore it's off-putting. So on our own SatNav, their service, there's some content on there, but also you will be able to find where the grants are. So it will, if you key in some details into the UMi SatNav service, it'll tell you what grants are available to you based on your sector, your location, etc. And I'm pretty certain it's the best grant finding tool in the UK, but anybody can get back to me and tell me it's not. If they've tried
you're not
that,
biased, obviously.
Well, I mean, I've plugged everybody else. I need to have a chance, Jack, to talk about UMi. But on a serious note, you will find where you can get the grants and stuff via that site.
Brilliant. No, that's really good. I mean, we're going to pin all this information into like the comments underneath where the podcast is. Just giving James a load of work to do there, so he'll really appreciate me for that, for trawling through all of the plugs and recommendations you've given. I'm conscious of time, but the last thing I kind of wanted us to talk about was some of the potential things to look out for, some of the pitfalls of rolling out ESG. And I feel like we've touched on kind of greenwashing. I don't know if it's worth giving a very brief explanation of what that is, because that may be a blind spot for some people, but and maybe just talk about broader where some of the areas that people need to be mindful of when they start their ESG journey.
I think, greenwashing is simply people doing it because they perhaps have to, and it's a compliance-based thing, and therefore it's just, it's done to the bare minimum. It's not actually done sustainably or for the right reasons. And that I have to say, I understand the debate at the moment, and I haven't reached a personal conclusion in terms of, well, if people are doing some stuff that's good, is that not better than them doing nothing that's good? So that's a wee dilemma. So so that's the whole kind of greenwashing thing, and I think there's a washing for everything these days. In terms of ticking boxes, it's the whole washing analogy has run away with itself, I think. But never mind. In terms of pitfalls, with reference to embarking on considering how do you enhance your ESG position, because all but businesses already have one. And this is the thing, it's not about starting something. I think it's about firstly identifying where you are and where you want to be, because that'll be different for different businesses. So you already have some sort of standing and footprint from an ESG perspective. It just might be accidental. You might not be consciously considering it. So do some kind of benchmark, understand consciously what you're currently doing and what you'd like to achieve over the course of the next month, year, 3 years, whatever horizon you want to give it. And really, really importantly, I made this point with my bin warrior comment, get your team involved. It doesn't matter whether you're a 2-man band or a 200-man band. It's not going to be successful if the people in your business are not excited, empowered and energized to support it. Because really what you're trying to do as well in your own business is create that momentum, to create that movement, to create that desire to be better or more impactful. So don't try and do it alone, because it'll be blinking hard work and you'll probably always feel like you're pushing water uphill, chasing people around, trying to get them to recycle or turn the lights off or whatever else. It'll become really, really tiring and boring, and therefore you'll stop doing it. So if you're not going to get people involved, then question whether or not you start in the first place, I would say. Also, the other pitfall is people try to do everything at once. And it is an elephant. There's so much you can do. When you sit back and reflect about the impact that your business has in these areas, the opportunities to do more, to do better are incredible for any business. I don't care what the business looks like. So just make sure you break it down into bite-sized chunks, because they'll be really meaningful and they'll make a huge difference. You don't have to do everything at once. And even those supply chain requirements, where I've seen it in big private sector supply chains or from a procurement perspective in the public sector, what they ask you for at the moment is an understanding for where you currently are and what your intent is. you don't have to reach particular measures or standards or anything like that. So it goes back to my first point. Just pause for a minute. Take a moment to reflect on what your current position is, and don't fall into the trap of thinking you've got to have some immense strategy that delivers incredible impact over a short-term period. That's not what it's about.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's what I would say in terms of things to avoid.
So yeah, I mean, it's in terms of the now where how principle, which we talk about quite a lot on this podcast, in terms of understanding where you're at the moment and where you want to be. And by understanding those 2 points, you can understand what you need to do in order to get there. So it seems to be universal. And I suppose another point is in terms of ESG, where you said you need to bring your team along with you. And in terms of B Corp specifically, it's not, B Corp isn't aimed at someone that's at a particular size. You don't have to reach a certain turnover target or headcount in order to do it. We have B Corps that are, one-man consultancies all the way up to some of the big kind of multinational companies as well. Is that fair to say?
Absolutely. And because everybody can make a difference. Individually, we can make a difference. The only thing with B Corp, because it is evidence-based, is you have to be trading for more than 12 months to achieve certification. Because quite rightly, how can you provide that evidence that you are doing something sustainably and well when you've only been doing it for a month? It's not sufficient evidence. But what you are, the minute that you start the journey of certification, once you've made the commitment, which you can do pre-12 months old, is you can be B Corp pending. So you can say to the market, to your customers, to your team, that you've made that commitment, and that's, you've made that statement. So you can be classed as B Corp pending, but you can't achieve certification until after 12 months.
Mm-hmm. Fascinating, yeah. Hopefully people have got some really good takeaways on ESG and B Corp off the back of this. Looking at the time, I think you've got a very busy day. You need to be all over the Northeast.
By the sounds.
Yeah, I like to keep myself busy. Pretend to be, anyway. Otherwise Graham will have a go at me. So best pretend to be busy.
Very warm. He's a lovely man. Can't imagine that.
But yeah, I just want to thank you very much for coming on and chatting to us, Nicki. I think it's been a really interesting, 45 minutes or so, just chatting and getting a bit more of an understanding. You've said yourself you deliberately don't position yourself as an expert, but you clearly are very knowledgeable in the area, and it's been really interesting to get your insights on that and where you think ESG is going and how people can kind of start on that journey. So I'm really grateful for your time and your thoughts on this.
No, thanks, Jack. I really appreciate you asking me. Thank you.
No worries. Just to return back to our listeners, I really hope you got some really useful insights off the back of that. Obviously, feel free to reach out to either Nicki or myself if you've got any other questions. We will both be at the Be Social event, as you've already plugged already, Nicki, at the end of March. That is available on certainly on the Robson Laidler Eventbrite. So feel free to give that a search if you're interested in going. It's in Newcastle, as Nicki said. And hopefully see you guys there. But likewise, if you've got any thoughts, feel free to reach out to us. And thank you very much for listening.